One of the reasons the MCU is so good is because of their impeccable casting. But what if other actors had played these roles? Well, it's a Marvel Monday, so today I'm gonna recast Phase 1 of the MCU just for fun. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I started this channel because I was driving everyone around me crazy talking about movies way too much. If you can relate, you're probably in the right place, and consider clicking that subscribe button. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your picks for who you think could have played these roles if the iconic actors that were cast in them didn't get the parts. And as I went into this, I was thinking who else could have been cast as these roles when they were originally cast back 10 years ago. I'm not looking forward, I am looking backwards. With that said, let's get started. We'll kick things off at the beginning with Iron Man Tony Stark. Now, casting Robert Downey Jr. in the role was truly inspired because at that point in time, he had a very bad reputation from 10 years of personal struggles, and he was in the process of rebuilding his career, and Jon Favreau took a chance on him, and obviously it paid off. But who else could have played this role? I'm gonna go with Tom Cruise. He'd actually expressed interest in playing the role back in the late 90s and wanted to be a producer, and so there was a little bit of chatter and they tried to make something happen. But when you're trying to think who can play a character that can be like charismatic, charming, but also have a lot of darkness to them, Tom Cruise is a lot better than people give him credit for a lot of the time because he's such a big movie star. And so we forget some of how dramatic he can be. In fact, prior to kicking off the Mission Impossible franchise, he was mostly a dramatic actor in films like Born on the 4th of July, The Firm, A Few Good Men, and many other films during the late 80s and early 90s. And it was only kind of later that he became known as kind of the action guy. But when you combine all of those together, you have someone that can play the darker sides while, of course, being the charismatic side to him, and he can be funny. But if you watch something like Magnolia, he can also go really dark and play more the douchebag side of things that you need to have for Tony Stark. I think there's a lot there, and in an alternate world, he could have been in that role. Moving right along, we've got War Machine Rhodey, and this is an interesting one because we've already had two actors play this part. For my replacement on this one, I'm gonna go with a Collateral reteam and go with Jamie Foxx. Now, of course, we've seen him kind of as a fun character in a lot of movies, but he's also an Academy Award nominated actor, and even for Collateral, which he did with Tom Cruise, was nominated for that film. He's played military roles before in Jarhead, and so he has a lot that he can kind of pull from to play this specific role of Rhodey, but as well play off of Tony Stark. You need someone that can have the fun banter, but also can have a little bit of that fatherly figure trying to get Tony to behave a little bit better while being the military man, while also having star-level charisma, leading man characteristics. Of course, Jamie Foxx has all of that. He has Jarhead to pull from to kind of have the military side to it. And these two actors have played these parts before because in my world, we got Tom Cruise in that role. And so because of that, I think that there's a lot of potential. And because we got Jamie Foxx in this role, maybe there's potential that in my Phase 2 or Phase 3, Rhodey gets his own War Machine movie. I'd be all for it. Then we've got Nick Fury, who showed up right there in the post-credit scene in the original Iron Man. This is another one that gets a little bit tricky and interesting because the MCU version of Nick Fury is based off the Ultimates, and the Ultimates version of Nick Fury was designed to look like Samuel L. Jackson, and so it's so difficult to see anyone other than Samuel L. Jackson in this role, and he has such a distinct personality that just kind of dominates the screen, the character, that it's tough to imagine anyone else in the role. For this one, I'm actually going to give two different answers for it. And the first one, if we're going to go with kind of this Ultimates version, but we couldn't get Samuel L. Jackson, You need someone that can still have a nice swagger on screen, that can have that energy, that can command a room full of movie stars and superheroes. Go with Denzel Washington. Obviously, he's one of the most celebrated actors of the last 40 years. He has that ability to kind of pull people together, to give motivational speeches, to be intense. He can be the leader of this group of people. I'm going to go in a different direction on this one. If you go with the classic comic book version of Nick Fury, that actually they did an adaptation in the late 90s that was written by David Goyer, who wrote the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan, but that would start David Hasselhoff. I do not want David Hasselhoff, but what if you got like a Harrison Ford in a role like that? Of course, he brings a certain gravitas. He can be cranky. As we saw in The Force Awakens, he can command a younger generation around while uniting them in other senses. And so he has a totally different energy to him, but you can see him still commanding the screen, being in charge of a room, and being funny, sarcastic, while at the same time being taken seriously. Next up is the Incredible Hulk himself, Bruce Banner, and another one where we've already had a recast and had two people play this character in the MCU. And then if you go just a few years before that, you also had Eric Bana in this role as well. For my version, I'm actually going to go with the person that was sort of cast in the role before Eric Bana was, Billy Crudup. There was a previous version of the film that Jonathan Hensley was writing, and then he was going to direct it, and then it fell apart. And Billy Crudup was the person that they had in mind in this role. And as soon as I read that, I went, yeah, I can see that. That one makes a good bit of sense. He's an actor that has done comic book films. He plays Barry Allen's dad in Justice League. He, of course, is in Watchmen, but he's also played a lot of these roles where he's in a suit, in a lab, in an office, and he doesn't give off like action star vibe. And Bruce Banner's not supposed to. He's supposed to give off scientist vibe, which plays nicely into pre-Dr. Manhattan era of his role in Watchmen and the little glimpses that we get to see in there. But he's played a lot of these roles where he can be someone that is charming and enjoyable without being the dominant personality in the room, which is kind of what you want for Bruce Banner, but he's also a great actor that can have the range to have the burst that you need as he transitions into the Hulk. Moving right along to Iron Man 2, which introduced Black Widow. Of course, Scarlett Johansson got the part, has been playing it for now 10 years, and continues to play the part even though her character has already been killed off. But prior to her being cast in the role, Emily Blunt was in heavy talks to take the part, but then she couldn't in the end take the part because of a scheduling conflict with her part in the movie Gulliver's Travels, which was not a very good trade-off for her career. But as I heard this story, I went, yeah, that makes perfect sense. That would be great casting in this alternate world that we're doing right now. So I will go with Emily Blunt in the role. And the key movie you got to check out on this one is, of course, Edge of Tomorrow, where she plays against Tom Cruise, my Tony Stark. They have great chemistry, but more importantly, she can be the action star. You absolutely buy her in the part. Now, if you've only seen her as Mary Poppins, you might think like an odd choice, but I mean, she's in mech suit, she's doing push-ups, she's swinging swords around, killing aliens with machine guns, and you can absolutely see her as Black Widow, this trained assassin working for S.H.I.E.L.D. and as a part of the Avengers. And of course, she's a very versatile actress, so figuring out dialects and accents, whatever she needs to do, she could pull it off without question. And of these, sometimes I'm like, I don't know, would this be better? Emily Blunt, I would have no fear that it would be right on par with what Scarlett Johansson has done with the part. Moving right along, we get to Thor, and this is another tricky one because this is a character that just has to be larger than life. He has to be the biggest guy in the room and have the grandeur of Asgard, but can pull off the fish out of water comedy. So there's a lot of things you gotta balance with this one, and Chris Hemsworth obviously has done a great job doing that for the last 9 years, and looks like he wants to keep doing that moving forward. But in my alternate world, I'll go with a fun pick here. Go with Alexander Skarsgård. Now, if you don't know why this is a fun pick, it's because his dad Stellan Skarsgård is the scientist in the Thor movies. So he wasn't cast in this, but his dad was. They don't look all that similar, so you actually probably wouldn't even need to recast Stellan in the role. He could still stay in it. But why would I go with Alexander Skarsgård? He's a huge guy. He's like 6'4". If you've seen his Tarzan movie, he absolutely can commit to a role and look like an incredible specimen of muscularity, much as Chris Hemsworth has been able to do. But throughout the years, he's played charismatic leads. He has dramatic depth to him. He's done a bunch of this stuff. But the big point of reference would be his Tarzan movie, where you can see that he can do this kind of role. And even that one has a little bit of a fish out of water. Of course, it has the physicality to it, but you could see him as someone that kind of commands the screen and is the biggest guy in the room. Moving right along to Loki, and for this one, I'm gonna go with Rami Malek. For this part, you need someone that can be likable and have a certain charisma to them, that has ability to kind of connect with other characters on screen, but also has something about the way that they look that makes them feel a little bit otherly. And when I think of people like that, Rami Malek comes immediately to mind. Of course, you can check out Bohemian Rhapsody and see him as a person that can have a charm to him, that can connect with a group of people. Obviously, you have to do that with a band, but then of course, just there's also this other side to him where it's like an odd way that he looks, so it would make him feel otherly, as he does in the world of Asgard and as he's supposed to. And you want to be able to like see kind of like the suspicious side to him, like, you know, that he's always conniving, and he has that look about him. I haven't seen all of Mr. Robot, but certainly that would be the one to kind of demonstrate this guy that's got something mischievous always kind of going right along with him. And I think you put him in a role like that and he fills it out. Also in the movie Thor, we get our first look at Hawkeye. And for this one, I'm gonna go with Joel Edgerton. This is one of these actors that's been in a lot of movies over the last 10 years. He's even directed a few movies that have been very well received. He's done a film like Warrior, where he's in a cage as an MMA fighter. He's done a bunch of dramatic roles. But what he hasn't gotten is his like big franchise yet. He feels like one of these actors that just is missing that piece to kind of fill out his resume. And I think he could have filled in this type of role as Clinton Barton, Hawkeye in the MCU really well. Of course, as I mentioned before, he was in the movie Warrior. He can do the physicality. He can get into great shape. He's right around the same age as the current Clint Barton that we have in movies like Warrior. Once again, it's going to be my point of reference for most of this. You can see him as the family man for that side of the character, and he's been in a lot of ensemble films where he has to kind of have a back and forth with people, and just sees like someone that has a very similar Jeremy Renner type vibe to him, while also having kind of his own distinct vibe at the same time. And finally, Captain America, another tough one because Chris Evans is just so good in this part. So who else do I think could play this part? I'm gonna go with Armie Hammer, the actor that has been a fan cast favorite for over a decade now, when he was cast as Batman in George Miller's Justice League movie. And ever since then, every time there's discussion about a new, big, tall comic book character that needs to be cast, his name is thrown out there, and it hasn't happened. But which ones would he possibly fit with? And I think you could see him as Captain America. He has that kind of just traditional, handsome American look about him. He's a big, tall guy, so as long as you can squish him down, as we know that they can with the technology, he can fill out the suit and show himself as the transformed version of him. We've seen him throughout the years play drama, play serious, play fun. He can be funny. He's been nominated for awards. He's led big blockbusters. He's led smaller action films. He's got all the different things you need, and you can easily look at his filmography and see how he could fill out a character like Steve Rogers. So there you have it. That was kind of my recast of the MCU Phase 1. Just wanted to try something a little bit different. You can find more of my Marvel content right over there. I've done more of this kind of speculative fan cast stuff before. You check it out somewhere right over here. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.